A single mother, in urgent need of financial support, takes on a role as a caregiver. Unbeknownst to her, she was about to embark on a journey of caring for a wealthy individual confined to a wheelchair. In the midst of turmoil and indulgence, the future held unexpected revelations for them both in this fervent tale. Sarah Thompson adjusted her name badge from St. Dyke, Mary's hospital one last time, her hands trembling slightly as she arranged her belongings in the small locker room closet. After 5 years in the role of a nursing assistant, this would mark her last shift. The hospital's restructuring led to numerous layoffs, and she was one of the employees affected. "Mom, are you feeling down?" The gentle melody of Ethan's voice, her 6-year-old son, lingered in her thoughts. She had entrusted the boy to Mrs. Wilson, her reliable neighbor, before arriving for this last shift. Her son's question lingered in her heart, pulling at her emotions. How could she convey to a child that in merely a month, all of her savings had vanished due to essential costs? The transition felt like a bittersweet goodbye. Sarah was intimately familiar with each corridor, every room, and all the procedures. She began her journey here as an intern, carving out her position through unwavering dedication and genuine empathy. Patients consistently admired her compassionate approach, particularly towards the elderly, whom she attended to with remarkable patience. "Thompson, do you have a minute to chat?" Nancy's voice, her supervisor, broke into her reverie. "I understand it's your final day, but I could really use your assistance with Mr. Anderson in room 304. Today, he's proving to be quite challenging." With a slight nod, Sarah made her way down the hallway, heading toward the room that had been pointed out to her. Mr. Anderson had a reputation for his difficult demeanor, yet she consistently found a way to soothe him. As she stepped into the room, she noticed the elderly man in a state of agitation, adamantly rejecting his medications. "Mr. Anderson, I brought that chamomile tea you enjoy," Sarah said, her voice soft and soothing. It was a deception, merely water. Yet this clever ruse never failed to impress. "This will assist with the treatment." The man who had been resolute just moments ago took the medication without any further objections. It was this unique ability to navigate challenging personalities that set Sarah apart in her professional endeavors. How could she possibly make it through without this position? How would she maintain the cozy space she shared with Ethan? As the shift came to a close, her co-workers gathered in the break room for a heartfelt farewell. Decadent chocolate cake, rich coffee, and warm, snug embraces. Jessica, her closest companion at the hospital, found herself unable to contain her tears. "Sarah, you truly shine among us." "What they're doing isn't fair," Jessica said, as she handed her an envelope. "We gathered some funds. It may not be significant, but it could provide some assistance while you search for something better." Sarah's eyes shimmered with unshed tears, yet she maintained a bright smile. She had to hold it together, not at this moment. Ethan required her to exhibit strength. She slipped the envelope into her bag, leaving it unopened. She held her dignity too high to count the amount in front of the crowd. Once back home with Ethan in tow from the neighbors, Sarah set about crafting a straightforward dinner. A serving of rice, beans, and a perfectly fried egg for each individual. She observed her son as he enthusiastically devoured his meal, sharing stories about his day at school, the drawing he had created, and his progress in reading larger words. "Mom, why have you stopped working at the hospital?" Ethan inquired, his deep brown eyes locked onto her, brimming with curiosity. "At times, dear, circumstances shift," she responded, striving to maintain her composure. "However, I will discover a new opportunity, one that surpasses the last. Just wait and see." Once Ethan was tucked in for the night, Sarah settled at the modest kitchen table, surrounded by a scattering of bills. The rent had not been paid on time. A disconnection notice was issued for the electricity bill, and Ethan's school tuition was approaching its due date in a week. The severance pay would hardly suffice for 2 months of expenses. She pulled out her cell phone and started exploring job sites, dispatching resumes to every available nursing assistant role. At that moment, another advertisement piqued her interest. seeking a dedicated caregiver with a nursing background for full-time companionship at an on-site residence, offering a competitive salary above the market rate. The advertisement came from a well-respected agency, and the location pointed to one of the city's most affluent neighborhoods. Sarah paused briefly. Residing at the workplace would signify significant transformations for her and Ethan. However, the proposed salary was nearly 3 times what she earned at her previous hospital. With quivering fingers, she pressed the apply button. A message materialized on the phone screen in no time at all. Tomorrow at 9 a.m., the interview will take place at Blackwood Manor, located at 1000 Oak Avenue. Sarah gazed at the room where Ethan rested serenely. For him, she would confront any obstacle. Little did she know that this application would transform her life in ways beyond her wildest dreams. The cab came to a halt before a grand wrought iron gate, its presence both striking and formidable. Sarah anxiously fiddled with the navy blue blazer she had purchased at a clearance sale 2 years prior, her most polished ensemble. She settled the fare using a portion of the funds her hospital colleagues had provided, then inhaled deeply before activating the intercom. "Good morning, Blackwood Manor," a refined female voice responded. "Good morning. I am Sarah Thompson. I have an interview lined up for 9 o'clock. The gate creaked open, unveiling a garden that was carefully tended to with precision. A pathway lined with palm trees guided the way to a grand mansion, boasting classic architecture and rising 3 stories, adorned with elegant French windows. Sarah sensed her heart pounding in her chest. The location exceeded all her expectations. At the main entrance, a middle-aged woman in a pristine uniform stood waiting. "My name is Martha, and I take care of the household. I kindly ask that you accompany me." The mansion's interior exuded an air of opulence and sophistication. Walls adorned with paintings that appeared to hold immense value, while the furniture exuded the charm of priceless antiques. Sarah trailed behind Martha along a spacious corridor, their footsteps softened by the luxurious Persian carpet beneath them. "Prior to your encounter with Mr. James Blackwood, there are several important details I must clarify." Martha halted beside a sturdy oak door. The master had been a highly engaged businessman until 6 months prior, when an accident occurred. Since that time, he has transformed. He tends to be more reserved and can come across as harsh at times. The previous 3 caregivers didn't stay for more than a week. Sarah nodded, absorbing the details. Her encounters with challenging patients at the hospital may prove beneficial in this context. "There's just one more thing," Martha continued, her voice dropping to a whisper. "He despises expressions of sympathy. The previous caregiver was let go for expressing sympathy when he accidentally dropped a cup." The door swung open, revealing a vast office space where Sarah stepped inside. Expansive windows framed a picturesque scene of the rear gardens, where a shimmering swimming pool mirrored the dawn sky. James Blackwood sat in a motorized wheelchair. He fell short of Sarah's expectations. In spite of his circumstances, he upheld a graceful demeanor. He appeared to be around 45 years old, with gray hair at his temples that contrasted with the mostly black strands still present. His face was chiseled, and his green eyes scrutinized her with an unsettling intensity. "Ah, so you are the individual representing the hospital." His voice resonated with depth and precision. It was not a question. "Absolutely, sir. Sarah Thompson, a dedicated nursing assistant boasting 5 years of hands-on experience. What prompted your departure from that place?" The tone carried a hint of accusation. "Reduction of personnel, reorganization of healthcare facilities." Sarah maintained her composure, determined not to reveal any doubt. "Have you encountered cases involving spinal cord injuries?" "Indeed, I spent 2 years in the rehabilitation ward." James shifted his chair, drawing nearer. "It appears that you have a young child, as indicated in your application." "Indeed, Ethan is 6 years old. That might pose a challenge. I require complete commitment." "With all due respect, Mr. Blackwood, my experiences as a mother have imparted lessons in unwavering commitment and the virtue of patience." Sarah astonished herself with her own audacity, yet stood resolute. The air was thick with an uneasy quiet. James observed her intently, as if seeking to decipher the meaning hidden beneath her words. He continued, stating that the position necessitates residing here. Your son will need to accompany us. At the rear of the property, you'll find an annex featuring 2 bedrooms. Martha will be able to demonstrate it to you later. Regarding school hours, we have a driver, James interjected. He is able to take him and collect him. However, I require your availability around the clock, even on weekends, and time away from work. Once a month, during the weekend, my sister pays a visit. He took a moment to reflect. The compensation will be twice the amount that was initially stated, along with additional perks. However, I do have 2 conditions that cannot be altered. Sarah lingered, taut with anticipation. First and foremost, complete confidentiality regarding all matters that occur within these walls. Secondly, I have no desire for any form of sympathy. I am not a pitiable creature. I am your boss. Is my message understood? Absolutely clear, Mr. Blackwood. James pivoted the chair, directing his gaze toward the window. Martha will guide you to your accommodations. Your journey begins at 7 tomorrow. Make sure to arrive on time. Sarah trailed behind Martha as they exited the office, her thoughts swirling in a chaotic dance. As they approached the annex, she became aware that her hands were trembling ever so slightly, not out of fear, but rather from a sense of relief and a touch of apprehension. She had secured the position, yet there was an unsettling quality in James Blackwood's gaze that troubled her. What she observed in those piercing green eyes was neither anger nor bitterness. It was solitude. The annex surpassed the size of her present apartment, decorated with simplicity, yet exuding quality. A quaint little garden stood between it and the main house. Ethan would have room to explore, and she could gather enough resources to ensure his future is bright. Martha remarked gently as she guided her through the rooms. He's not a bad person. He's simply adrift. Prior to the incident, he was not the same. Constantly grinning, exploring new places, engaging in athletic activities. At that moment, her words hung in the air, unfinished. Sarah gazed out the window at the grand mansion, a stark contrast to all that was familiar to her. Tomorrow, a fresh chapter would unfold. Unbeknownst to her, this house concealed a multitude of secrets beyond her wildest imagination, and her heart would face trials she could never have anticipated. Before the sun had even begun to rise, Sarah's first day at the mansion commenced. Ethan remained in slumber while she meticulously arranged the final boxes in the annex. The young lad was utterly captivated by the fresh surroundings, particularly the garden that offered him a realm for play. "Mom, it resembles a house straight out of a film," he had exclaimed upon seeing the place the day before. At 6:30, Martha arrived to provide the first set of instructions. Mr. James rises promptly at 7 o'clock. He enjoys having breakfast on the bedroom balcony before starting his physical therapy session at 9. Dr. Paul, the physiotherapist, visits 3 times a week. On different days, you'll assist with fundamental exercises. The master bedroom spanned the whole eastern wing of the 2nd floor. Sarah noted the elegant hospital bed seamlessly woven into the opulent surroundings. A ceiling track system enabled seamless movement, and the bathroom exemplified accessibility while maintaining a sense of elegance. "Good morning, Sir Blackwood." As Sarah stepped into the room, she offered a warm greeting, precisely at 7. James had already risen, gazing out the window. He took his time to respond. He simply remarked that breakfast was delayed. Sarah glanced at the clock, 7:02. She understood that for him, being on time was synonymous with expectation. She registered it in her mind. Make sure to get there 10 minutes ahead of each appointment. The morning routine was intricate. James required assistance with his fundamental necessities, and Sarah quickly realized the reasons behind the other caregiver's abandonment. He was precise to an extreme degree, insisting that every procedure be executed exactly as he outlined. He grumbled about the towel being too cold during the bath, and remarked that this soap wasn't his usual choice. "I apologize, sir. I will take care of the change. I have no interest in apologies." She desired skill, but he interrupted her abruptly. Sarah inhaled deeply, maintaining her composure. At the hospital, she discovered that challenging patients frequently concealed deeper feelings behind a facade of annoyance. As they sat on the balcony for breakfast, Sarah observed that James hardly ate anything from his plate. His gaze was locked on the horizon, where the city began to stir with life. At one moment, she noticed him gazing at the helipad in the back garden, now abandoned. "Did you take the helm?" Sarah embarked on her journey. The gaze directed at her was sharp. "I'm not compensating you to inquire about personal matters." Once more, silence enveloped the scene, interrupted solely by the gentle clinking of cutlery and the melodic chirping of birds in the garden. At 9 o'clock, Dr. Paul made his entrance for the physical therapy session. Sarah observed each exercise with keen interest, aware that she would have to perform them on different occasions. James carried out the movements with unwavering resolve, despite the discomfort evident on his face. "Outstanding advancement," remarked Dr. Paul. "Your arm sensitivity has significantly improved." "Not enough," James muttered, mostly to himself rather than to anyone else. Following the session, as Sarah assisted James in his recovery, she caught sight of a partially concealed photo tucked away in the nightstand drawer. He was captured in ski attire, beaming alongside an attractive woman. The photograph bore crumpled edges, suggesting it had been grasped countless times. The remainder of the morning unfolded amidst a routine of medications, breathing exercises, and a continuous stream of emails that James relayed to his secretary, Christine, stationed in an office on the first floor. Even in his absence, he exercised strict oversight of his enterprise. At noon, Martha came to announce that Ethan had returned from school. Sarah sensed a constriction in her chest. It marked the beginning of his journey at the new school. "You can go have lunch with your son," James said, catching her off guard. "Please return in 1 hour." In the annex, Ethan brimmed with excitement. "Mom, the school is incredible. A vast library and a sheltered court await exploration. And I made a friend, Peter." Sarah smiled, feeling a wave of relief wash over her. Her primary worry was about her son's ability to adjust to the new situation. "Did you happen to notice the grand house? It resembles a grand fortress. Could the gentleman in the wheelchair be a monarch?" "Ethan, my dear, please refrain from speaking in that manner. The house belongs to Mr. James, who is also my employer. It is essential for us to maintain discretion and show respect. Do you recall our previous conversation?" The boy nodded, yet his eyes gleamed with a thirst for knowledge. Upon returning from lunch, Sarah discovered James in a state of agitation. He clutched a newspaper featuring bold headlines about his enterprises, his expression dark and tumultuous. "Incompetence," he exclaimed as she walked in. 3 months. In a mere 3 months, they began to dismantle all that I had created. Sarah held her tongue, patiently anticipating guidance. She observed his hands clutching the arms of the chair with such intensity that his knuckles turned pale. "I must head to the central office," he announced abruptly. "Your physician has made a recommendation, sir." "I have no interest in that. Arrange a meeting with the driver for tomorrow." "Indeed, sir." Sarah took a moment to consider her words. "Shall I arrange the documents you require for your departure?" James gazed at her, taken aback by the lack of opposing views. "Absolutely, that would be quite beneficial." As Sarah sorted through the folders, she observed his uneven breathing, a telltale sign of anxiety she had come to identify during her time at the hospital. "Mr. James," she whispered gently, "shall we take a moment to go over these documents on the balcony?" Breathing in the crisp, clean air rejuvenates the spirit and sharpens one's thoughts. To her astonishment, he responded with a subtle nod of agreement. On the balcony, as the afternoon sun gently caressed the garden shadows, Sarah observed a delicate shift in James's tension. His shoulders eased a bit, and the sharpness in his voice softened as he conveyed the instructions. A sudden ball noise drew their attention. Ethan frolicked in the annex garden, sending his soccer ball thudding against the wall. Unexpectedly, James remarked that he appears to be happy. Sarah smiled, catching a glimpse of an intriguing spark in his eyes. Was it yearning? Children adjust with remarkable ease, she responded with careful consideration. James refocused on the papers, yet Sarah observed that occasionally, his gaze would wander to the boy, who remained blissfully unaware of his surroundings. The remainder of the afternoon unfolded in a familiar rhythm of medications, exercises, and tasks at hand. As darkness fell and Sarah was getting ready to head to the annex, James summoned her. He mentioned that he plans to leave at 8 a.m. tomorrow and expressed his gratitude for the assistance with the documents. It marked the very first occasion he expressed gratitude for anything. Sarah nodded, understanding that fleeting moment for what it truly represented, a foundational stone in constructing a pathway across a chasm of skepticism and resentment. As she lay in her new bed, Sarah pondered the events of the day. James Blackwood was a multifaceted individual, bearing scars that extended well beyond his corporeal state. A whisper within her suggested that unearthing these wounds would prove to be both her most formidable challenge and her most profound reward. The trip to the central office of Blackwood Enterprises unveiled a different side of James to Sarah. Clad in a perfectly tailored suit, he led the meeting with an effortless authority that highlighted his physical fragility. His wheelchair, placed at the head of the table, only amplified his commanding presence. The figures for the third quarter are simply unacceptable. His voice sliced through the atmosphere of the boardroom on the 20th floor. Could someone clarify how we ended up losing the Asian contract? Sarah watched quietly from the corner of the room, alert for any indication that he might require assistance. The executives, clad in their costly suits and wearing strained expressions, exchanged anxious glances. Mr. Blackwood, one of them began, after your absence some clients became uncertain about my capability to oversee the business? James finished, his voice eerily composed. Fascinating. I had no idea my legs played a role in the company's strategic decisions. The ensuing silence was overwhelming. Sarah observed the way James's hands gripped the wheelchair controls, a clear indication of the tension she had come to understand all too well. He instructed that a comprehensive report on every lost account be on his desk by tomorrow, and to arrange a video conference with our Asian partners. I will address this matter myself. After the meeting, in the secluded elevator, James finally allowed the facade of the unyielding CEO to slip away. His hands quivered ever so slightly. I require my medication, he whispered. With swift hands, Sarah unzipped her bag, revealing a meticulously organized collection of medications inside. While she carefully administered the medicine, her gaze caught the glistening drops of sweat forming on his forehead. You need to rest, she said, her tone a blend of firmness and kindness. Those were countless hours spent in discussions. I can't rest, he replied, his frustration evident. Can't you tell they're attempting to force me out? They perceive me as unworthy, unable. You just proved otherwise, Sarah interrupted, surprising them both with her audacity. I witnessed seasoned leaders quaking at your remarks. Your true power lies beyond your legs, Mr. James. He gazed at her, an unnameable emotion flickering in his green eyes. Just as he was about to reply, the elevator doors slid open in the parking garage. As Sarah made her way back to the mansion, a message from Ethan's school arrived. Her heart turned to ice as she absorbed the words. Is there an issue? James inquired, observing her expression. Ethan experienced a minor mishap during physical education. She responded, striving to maintain her composure. It's not a big deal, but Anderson, James contacted the driver and made a brief stop at the school before returning home. Sarah gazed at him, taken aback. There's no obligation, sir. I can hail a cab. That's absurd, he interrupted her. Anderson arrived at the school. Ethan was discovered in the infirmary, a bandage wrapped around his knee and his eyes swollen and red from tears. The boy attempted to muster a smile upon seeing his mother. I apologize, Mom. I took a tumble while playing soccer. Sarah embraced him, inspecting the wound. It's all right, my dear. Incidents occur. You engage in the sport of soccer. Everyone was taken aback by James's voice. For the first time, he spoke directly to Ethan. The young lad gave a timid nod. I enjoy playing the role of the goalkeeper. James appeared to ponder a thought. At the rear of the mansion there lies a soccer field. It has remained untouched for months. Yet, Ethan's eyes grew wide. Is that so? Is this a genuine field? Anderson can tidy up the space, James murmured, almost lost in his own thoughts. Perhaps your school friends could come over to play one day? Ethan's expression brightened. The ache in his knee briefly set aside. Sarah experienced a gentle warmth blossoming in her chest. It was the first moment she witnessed James display any form of unplanned generosity. Upon returning to the mansion, as Sarah assisted James with his evening physiotherapy, she observed that he was exhibiting a gentler demeanor than usual. His typical directives were substituted with gentler appeals. What motivated you to pursue a career in nursing? He inquired abruptly in the midst of an exercise. Sarah paused, taken aback by the unexpected personal interest. I've always had a desire to nurture and support others. After Ethan arrived, I found myself in need of a steady career. What about his father? He's not part of our lives, she replied, her tone signaling that the matter was settled. James acknowledged the boundary established, his nod a silent testament to his understanding. For a brief moment, they toiled in quietude, the sole noise being the tallying of tasks. Well, he finally spoke up. Prior to the accident, I also played soccer. Met with the executives as part of a team. We organized charity tournaments. His voice wavered just a bit on the final word. Sarah persisted with the exercises, allowing him the room to reflect on his own memories. The area is truly neglected, he went on after a moment of silence. Leaving it like that would be a missed opportunity. Sarah spoke gently, expressing that Ethan would find great joy in using the field. I'm certain his laughter would infuse this place with a vibrant energy. James remained silent, yet Sarah could see his gaze locked onto the window, where the sun dipped below the horizon, casting its glow over the desolate field. For the first time since her arrival at the mansion, she caught sight of a tiny fissure in the wall of chill he had constructed around himself. That night, as she tucked Ethan in the annex, Sarah pondered the ways in which people resembled houses. Some, such as Blackwood Manor, captivated with their exterior yet concealed a profound solitude within. Others, such as her quaint annex, were unpretentious yet brimming with vitality and affection. Some individuals, such as James, resembled fortresses, requiring merely the correct key to uncover the treasures concealed within. The joyous sound of children's laughter resonated through the gardens of Blackwood Manor, a delightful occurrence that had been absent for far too long. Ethan and 3 friends from school dashed around the freshly restored soccer field, while Sarah busily arranged a snack for the children in the outdoor area. From the second-floor balcony, James observed the bustling activity below. His face, usually reserved, bore an unusual expression, a blend of wonder and reminiscence. On that Saturday afternoon, Sarah noticed him glancing at the field repeatedly. It was the inaugural occasion when Ethan invited his friends over to play. Mr. James, she called, stepping onto the balcony with his afternoon tea in hand. The kids wondered if you'd be interested in watching their game downstairs. Don't be ridiculous, he responded, though lacking his typical severity. I have tasks to complete. Certainly, Sarah consented, organizing the tray with care. Perhaps the task can be postponed for 30 minutes. The sunset today is exceptionally stunning, especially when viewed from the garden. James gazed at her, sensing the subtle artfulness woven into her speech. Recently, Sarah had become adept at interpreting his expressions, uncovering the fissures in his facade of indifference. After a long pause, he finally agreed to give it 15 minutes, just to ensure they aren't wreaking havoc on my garden. Sarah suppressed a grin as she skillfully guided the wheelchair toward the elevator. As she traveled, she observed that James had swapped his dress shirt for a more relaxed version, a subtle nuance that caught attention. In the garden, the children felt a sense of apprehension at the sight of the house owner. However, Ethan, being more familiar with the situation, quickly initiated the conversation. Mr. James, Would you like to take on the role of the referee? Peter continues to execute slide tackles. I'm uncertain about Mr. James. Sarah started to speak, but was cut off. What's stopping us? James responded, catching everyone off guard. However, it is essential that you honor my requests. What was intended to last 15 minutes stretched into a full hour. James, seated in his chair on the sideline, officiated the game with a gravity that elicited laughter from the children. Slowly, Sarah observed his posture easing, and occasionally a faint smile graced his lips. He announced a penalty when Ethan was taken down in the box. Crucial strike for the blue team. The children erupted in cheers or groans, swayed by their allegiance to the teams, as Ethan focused intently on the impending kick. Sarah, pouring juice and arranging sandwiches at a nearby table, observed the scene with a tender heart. Cheers erupted as the ball soared into the top corner, and for the first time since her arrival at the mansion, Sarah was graced with the sound of a true laugh from James. Concise, focused yet authentic. A car's arrival shattered the moment's tranquility. A graceful woman swiftly exited, the sound of her high heels resonating against the pavement. James, she exclaimed, taken aback. What's happening here? Rebecca, he responded, his demeanor shifting abruptly. Your presence today caught me by surprise. Obviously, his sister replied, glancing around with a look that was difficult to interpret. May I speak with you privately? Sarah swiftly assembled the children for their snack, allowing the siblings some space. Yet she found herself catching snippets of the conversation that followed. You can't put yourself out there like this, Rebecca was saying. They're merely children enjoying a game of soccer, for heaven's sake. James's voice carried a recognizable edge of annoyance. It's clear that the focus lies elsewhere. The board expresses its concerns. What is your situation? How am I doing? The sound level rose. Using a wheelchair does not diminish my ability to make choices. Sarah engaged the children with captivating tales and playful activities, attempting to draw their attention away from the heated discussion. Ethan, on the other hand, continued to throw anxious looks toward James. After Ethan's friends departed, Sarah discovered James in his office, his familiar stormy expression evident. Text your evening medications, sir, she said gently. You can just leave them there, he responded with a hint of dryness. Sarah set the medications on the desk, yet she lingered for a moment longer. The kids thoroughly enjoyed the afternoon. Ethan declared it the finest Saturday he had ever experienced. James remained silent, yet his fingers tapped restlessly on the desk, an unmistakable indication of his unease that she had come to understand. You know, she continued, sometimes people are afraid of what they don't understand, of what's different from what they're used to. Your psychological analyses are unnecessary for me. He interrupted her, yet it lacked the typical severity. I'm not dissecting, sir, merely offering a perspective. Sarah took a moment to reflect. Ethan felt a sense of fear as well when we reached this place. Fearful of the unfamiliar, the unconventional. But today he finally perceived this place as a sanctuary. James finally turned his gaze toward her, his piercing green eyes locking onto hers. For a moment, Sarah perceived not the embittered businessman, but the man who chuckled while officiating a children's game. I have a video conference at 7 tomorrow, he said, deftly shifting the topic. Please organize the reports. Absolutely, sir. I will arrive at 6:30. As Sarah stepped back, she observed that the wrinkled photograph she had previously spotted in the drawer was now elegantly displayed in a frame on the desk. A minor yet impactful adjustment. Minor triumphs, she mused. This is the moment when the tallest barriers started to crumble. The day started with an unexpected storm that had not been predicted in the weather report. The thunder sent Ethan scurrying to Sarah's bed before dawn, while the relentless rain turned the mansion's gardens into miniature lakes. Martha informed Sarah anxiously upon her arrival at the main house that the power was out on the east side. Mr. James's room generator is functioning, but the elevator. Sarah instantly grasped the underlying meaning. Stranded on the second floor, James found himself in a state of solitude, cut off from the world below by the absence of the elevator. I've attempted to reach out to maintenance, But given the current storm, as Sarah glanced at the clock, the thought of his morning medication came back to her. He must take it without delay. As Sarah ascended the service stairs, she discovered James already alert, his demeanor more somber than ever. The generator's light cast flickering shadows throughout the room, while the thunder rumbled, causing the windows to quiver. "Good morning, sir," she said, striving to uphold the usual rhythm of the day. "There's nothing positive to say about it," he responded curtly. "I'm already aware of the elevator situation and the video conference with Asia. We can handle it from your laptop," Sarah proposed, as she organized his medications. "The internet signal is functioning, yet seems to be even more ineffective." Holding a crucial meeting from the comfort of the bedroom, reminiscent of a recluse. "What truly matters is the substance of the meeting, not the venue," Sarah contended, maintaining her composure as she took his blood pressure. "Today feels a tad elevated." "Clearly it's elevated. I'm confined up here like a sudden, thunderous clap shattered the silence, coinciding with a child's piercing scream that reverberated through the mansion. "Ethan." Sarah instinctively pivoted toward the door. "Go," James said, catching her off guard. "Prioritize his well-being above all else." Sarah discovered Ethan in the hallway, shaking with fear. The young lad had attempted to pursue her to the grand residence, and was now gripped by fear as the tempest raged around him. "Mother, it's so dark," he cried, grasping her waist tightly. Without a moment's hesitation, Sarah scooped him up and made her way back to James's room. To her astonishment, the businessman remained silent as she walked in with the boy. "Apologies, sir," she started. However, James cut her off with emotion. "He can stay," he remarked, his tone gentler than usual. "I also found storms unsettling at that age." Ethan, still holding onto his mother, gazed at James with curiosity. "Do you remember what my dad used to say to me?" James pressed on, catching Sarah off guard with his unexpectedly soft tone. "The thunder is merely the clouds engaging in a game of bowling." "Rolling the ball down the lane?" Ethan inquired, curiosity peaking even in the face of his trepidation. "Indeed, and when a thunderclap roars with intensity, another tremor reverberated through the dwelling. It's a hit." Ethan let out a tentative chuckle. "And the thunderous flash. Those are the lane lights," James replied, a subtle smile playing on his lips. "So the players can see where to bowl." Sarah observed the exchange, recognizing the distinct way James appeared while conversing with Ethan. The typical sternness of his demeanor eased, and his voice shed the authoritative quality he employed during discussions. "Mr. James," Ethan said, his voice steadier now, "would you be able to show me how to play real bowling sometime?" A profound stillness enveloped the room after the seemingly harmless inquiry. Sarah noticed James's expression stiffen once more, the truth of his physical state crashing back over him like a relentless tide. "Ethan, darling," Sarah started. Yet again, James caught her off guard. After a moment of reflection, he revealed that there's a bowling alley in the mansion's basement. It has remained shut for several months. Yet, perhaps Martha could verify if it's still functioning? Ethan's eyes sparkled with excitement. "Is it truly possible for us to utilize it?" "As long as your mother approves," James replied, glancing at Sarah with a curious expression. Naturally, she smiled when the tempest subsides. Just as expected, the main light flickered back to life, accompanied by the familiar hum of the elevator resuming its operation. "It appears we can return to a state of normalcy," James remarked, his voice regaining its composed demeanor. "The virtual meeting, all is set in the office," Sarah confidently stated. "Ethan, let's return to the annex. Feel free to sketch a little as you wait for the rain to pass." Ethan bid farewell to Mr. James. "I appreciate your explanation about the cloud bowling." Upon Sarah's return from settling Ethan, she discovered James gazing out the window, observing the storm that was starting to ease. "He reminds me of someone," James murmured, mostly to himself rather than to her. "Who is it?" "Me during that time. Prior to—" He left the sentence hanging, his gaze locked onto a photograph on the wall, depicting a beaming boy alongside an older man. "Is that your father?" Sarah embarked on her journey. James gave a subtle nod. He had an uncanny ability to find the right words whenever fear gripped me, even amidst the fiercest tempests. Sarah understood that his words went beyond the mere mention of the rain. James confronted other storms, internal ones, each day. And perhaps, much like the rain falling beyond the window, they too were starting to fade away. She softly reminded him that the video conference was in 20 minutes. Would you like to get everything ready here? Or would you rather head downstairs? He made the choice to descend. As you mentioned, the essence lies in the content, rather than the setting. While assisting James with his morning routine, Sarah pondered how storms can be essential for clearing the air, uncovering truths concealed beneath layers of defense. She realized that viewing the world through a child's perspective can remind us that even the most frightening moments can transform into tales of bowling in the clouds. As the days unfolded, the rhythm at Blackwood Manor took on fresh dimensions. Sarah observed subtle shifts in James, a softer greeting in the morning, a nearly imperceptible smile at times. The soccer field had transformed into a lively hub, with the cheerful sounds of children playing echoing through the weekends. After tucking Ethan in for the night, Sarah made her way back to the main house to complete her final duties. She discovered James in his office, surrounded by a sea of papers, the desk lamp casting playful shadows on his focused expression. "Your evening medications, sir," she said, setting the pills and a glass of water on the desk. James lifted his gaze from the papers, as if finally realizing how late it had become. "Thank you," he whispered, a sense of appreciation that had grown more common in recent times. Sarah was on the verge of stepping away when her gaze fell upon a photograph resting on the desk, distinct from the familiar one she often saw. In this image, James is seen beaming alongside a dark-haired woman, both elegantly attired for what appears to be a gala event. "My ex-fiancée Olivia," said James, catching Sarah off guard as he noticed her stare. That event took place 2 years ago during the company's winter ball. Sarah paused, caught in a moment of uncertainty about whether to speak up or remain silent. James seldom discussed his history, particularly when it came to his relationships. She possessed an undeniable beauty, Sarah mused. She was, James conceded, his voice heavy with an emotion that Sarah found elusive and ambitious. "We envisioned broadening our business reach across international borders. She is set to become the vice president of the new branch in Europe." "What happened?" Sarah inquired before she could hold back her curiosity. James positioned the chair to face the window. The gardens were enveloped in an otherworldly glow, courtesy of the full moon hanging high in the sky. After a prolonged pause, he finally responded, "The accident occurred. We were coming back from a business trip. I was determined to take the helm, despite my fatigue." The helicopter, his voice wavered. Olivia occupied the co-pilot seat. Sarah sensed a constriction in her chest. She endured, James finished. After enduring some scratches and a fractured leg, she made a physical recovery within a matter of weeks. And with a gentle tone, Sarah inquired softly. James emitted a sardonic chuckle. "She remained by my side in the hospital for a month, assuring me that we would conquer this together, that nothing would alter our bond." He lingered, his gaze locked onto a far-off horizon, until the moment the doctors declared I would never walk again. Sarah held her tongue, sensing that no words could capture the weight of the moment. Olivia found herself overwhelmed as he pressed on. She expressed her love for me, yet felt unable to commit her life to caring for someone like me, citing her own dreams and ambitions. Apologies escaped Sarah's lips in a soft whisper. "Don't be," James replied, his voice sharpening with a hint of its familiar edge. She was indeed correct. I would have been a weight to carry. "Sir," Sarah began, a surge of indignation washing over her. "You are not a weight to carry. You're an exceptional individual who requires assistance even for something as simple as bathing." He interrupted her, with a sharp edge of resentment. "Who struggles to ascend a mere staircase while simultaneously leading a vast business empire from a wheelchair." Sarah interjected, catching them off guard with her audacity. "Who instills fear in executives with just a single word." who introduced my son to the enchanting world of bowling in the clouds and revived this grand mansion. James gazed at her, his piercing green eyes illuminated by the soft glow of the dim light. For a fleeting instant, Sarah felt a pang of anxiety, as if she had ventured beyond an unseen boundary. "What keeps you here, Sarah?" he inquired, his tone gentler. "By now, you must have come across more appealing opportunities. Medical facilities, personal health care centers." Sarah sensed the gravity of that inquiry. It was indeed true. In recent weeks, she had received several proposals. Yet the thought of departing from Blackwood Manor, of parting ways with James, "For this is where I truly belong," she replied with quiet conviction. A stillness thick with unexpressed thoughts lingered in the air between them. Sarah sensed an unusual proximity between them. The gap between the wheelchair and her position was suddenly filled with a palpable tension. The tranquility was shattered by the faint rumble of thunder in the distance. A fresh tempest was on the horizon. "Ethan," Sarah whispered, recalling the fear that had gripped her son. "Go," James urged, his voice raspy. "He requires your support." With a slight nod, Sarah made her way toward the door. Before departing, she paused for a final glance. "Someone is needed as well, Mr. James," she murmured gently. "Perhaps not in the way Olivia envisioned, but you require someone who perceives what lies beyond the chair. A person who recognizes the essence of your being." With those words, she departed, leaving James solitary with his reflections and the image of a bygone era that felt ever more remote. As she dashed toward the annex, the initial raindrops kissing her skin, Sarah sensed that a shift had occurred that night. A hidden threshold had been crossed, truths unveiled in the dim glow of the office that demanded attention. As she embraced Ethan, soothing his anxieties with tales of bowling among the clouds, Sarah pondered the implications of those revelations for the future. What they would signify for James, for herself, and for the fragile equilibrium they had established in this mansion, which was gradually starting to feel like home. The days that ensued after the night of revelations enveloped Blackwood Manor in a transformed ambience. A delicate barrier had been removed, revealing a fresh perspective for both Sarah and James as they regarded one another. James, while still upholding his professional facade, started to reveal glimpses of vulnerability that would have seemed unimaginable in the past. In the course of his physiotherapy sessions, he began to reveal more about his life prior to the accident, offering small glimpses of memories that crafted a vivid image of a man who had once brimmed with vitality and aspirations. One morning, while Sarah assisted him with his exercises, James caught her off guard with an unexpected question. "Sarah, have you ever considered the idea of returning to school?" She halted, taken aback. "I admit that I have. I have always had a desire to focus on physiotherapy, but with Ethan and the costs," James nodded, deep in thought. "It's interesting to note that Blackwood Enterprises offers a scholarship program for its employees. I hadn't considered including the house staff, but perhaps it's time to rethink that approach." Sarah sensed her heart quicken. "Are you implying that this program could be advantageous for you?" "Indeed, he has finished. Certainly, we would need to modify your routine here, but, Mr. James, I find myself at a loss for words." Sarah sensed a surge of emotion, her eyes beginning to glisten. "Hold your words for now," he responded, a hint of a smile playing on his lips. "Consider it. Have a conversation with Ethan. This is a significant choice." That discussion paved the way for further dialogues. Sarah started to observe that James sought her input more frequently, not only regarding his health but also concerning everyday choices. Her perspective, once dismissed, now appeared to hold significance. One afternoon, as he sorted through the documents in the office, James stumbled upon yet another unexpected discovery. He mentioned, almost nonchalantly, that he was considering picking up the European branch project again. Sarah lifted her gaze from the documents. "The one you referred to with Olivia?" James gave a slight nod. "The market is favorable now, and I've come to understand that delaying plans due to my situation is a mistake. Life continues, doesn't it?" "I'm pleased to hear that," Sarah beamed. "Your capabilities are vast, and there remains an abundance of potential waiting to be uncovered." James gazed at her, his green eyes filled with intensity. It was you, Sarah, who opened my eyes to this. Your unwavering support, your confidence in me, even during moments when I doubted my own abilities. The atmosphere surrounding them felt electric, a tangible strain that neither was willing to acknowledge. Suddenly, the tranquility shattered as hurried footsteps echoed through the hallway. Ethan burst into the office, his eyes alight with enthusiasm. "Mother, Mr. James, check out what I created at school," he exclaimed, waving a vibrant piece of paper. With a gentle smile, Sarah accepted the drawing. It was a naive depiction, yet unmistakable. At Blackwood Manor, 3 silhouettes stand before the grand structure. A woman, a boy, and a man seated in a wheelchair. "It's our family," Ethan said with a childlike sincerity. "The instructor requested that we illustrate our home and family." Sarah's heart raced, uncertain of James's response to being depicted as part of the family in Ethan's drawing. To her astonishment, James reached out his hand, requesting to examine the drawing in greater detail. His gaze lingered on the paper for what felt like an eternity, a complex emotion playing across his features. "It's quite impressive, Ethan," he finally remarked, his voice raspy. "The intricacies of the mansion have been beautifully portrayed. What did you think of it?" Ethan inquired with a sense of urgency. "Is it possible for me to display it in your office?" James shot a fleeting look at Sarah, almost as if he were looking for her nod of approval. She gave a subtle nod. "Certainly," he responded. "Over there on that bulletin board. What are your thoughts?" Ethan dashed to display the drawing, excitedly sharing his choices of colors and intricate details. Sarah observed the scene, a tumult of emotions washing over her. Elation at James' acceptance, trepidation about its implications. A vision of a future she had never allowed herself to envision until that moment. After tucking Ethan in for the night, Sarah made her way back to the main house to begin her evening routine. She discovered James remaining in the office, his gaze locked onto Ethan's drawing. "He has a good heart," James remarked, acknowledging her presence. "Indeed he does," Sarah concurred, moving closer. "Mr. James, regarding the drawing. I completely get it if you'd rather I discuss this with Ethan regarding—" He interrupted, catching her off guard. "Everything is fine. In fact," he hesitated, seemingly in quest of the perfect expression. "Honestly, Sarah, I believe it's time for us to have a conversation. Concerning what lies ahead. Concerning— we—" Sarah sensed her heart pounding in her chest. "We?" she echoed, filled with doubt. James pivoted his chair, positioning himself to face her squarely. "Indeed we are. This grand estate, this position, everything has transformed since you and Ethan came into the picture. And I have transformed." The quiet that ensued was heavy with unexpressed potential, with emotions that had quietly developed over the months. "Mr. James, Sarah started, but the piercing ring of the phone cut her off. James replied, his face shifting swiftly to one of worry. "I comprehend. I will arrive in the morning." After ending the call, he shifted his gaze to Sarah. The setting was the hospital. Rebecca experienced a car accident. Fortunately, it wasn't serious, but— "You need to go," Sarah said, her understanding immediate. "I will make all the necessary arrangements for us to depart early." James nodded, filled with appreciation. As Sarah navigated the office, sorting through documents and making essential calls, they both understood that the discussion they were about to engage in would need to be postponed. Yet, that night marked an unalterable shift. As the mansion readied itself for a bustling evening, amidst the flurry of preparations for the unexpected journey, Sarah pondered how swiftly life could transform in a heartbeat. A drawing by a child, a sort of revelation, an unforeseen phone call. Every component intricately intertwines, creating a rich fabric of feelings and potential. The future, once perceived as clearly outlined, now unfolds into a landscape of possibilities and unknowns. As the night unfolded, Sarah pondered the fresh chapters that the dawn might unveil in this narrative they had unknowingly started to craft together. The hospital buzzed with its hectic rhythm as Sarah and James stepped in the following morning. For Sarah, the pale hallways and familiar scent evoked memories of her former life, now so far removed from the existence at Blackwood Manor. In room 305, Rebecca sat, her pale face stark against the recent bruises that marred her skin. As James walked in, tears welled up in her eyes. "James, I truly apologize," she started, her voice trembling. "I ought to have exercised greater caution. Quiet now, it's all right," James interjected, his tone unexpectedly soft. "The crucial aspect is that you are safe and sound." Sarah watched the siblings' interaction, feeling both relieved and uneasy. For the first time, she witnessed James expressing such raw emotion, and it prompted her to reflect on her own place within this family dynamic. "Miss Thompson," the sound of Rebecca's voice pulled her back to the present moment. "Thank you for your presence. I understand it may have caused some trouble with your son." "There's no need to worry," Sarah said with a gentle smile. "Ethan is accompanied by Mrs. Wilson. We are ready to assist you in every possible manner." The ensuing hours unfolded like a tempest of medical professionals, assessments, and choices. Sarah effortlessly stepped into the role of mediator, her background in the hospital proving invaluable in maneuvering through the complexities of bureaucracy and procedures. Amidst the ebb and flow of the corridors, Sarah stumbled upon an unexpected tableau. James, in his wheelchair, engaging in lively conversation with a cluster of children in the pediatric ward. As the plane executed a loop, she caught his voice, animated gestures enhancing the tale. The children erupted in laughter, utterly enchanted. Sarah sensed a gentle warmth blossoming within her chest. It felt like she caught a fleeting glimpse of a side of James that she had always sensed was there, yet seldom revealed itself. He possesses a unique charm when it comes to engaging with children. A voice next to her caught her off guard. There was Rebecca in a wheelchair with a nurse by her side. "Indeed he does," Sarah concurred, feeling a bit uncertain about how to respond. Rebecca observed her intently for a brief moment. "Is it all right if I call you Sarah? When James shared the news of you and your son residing in the mansion, I must admit I felt a sense of unease. But now, I see things more clearly." "Comprehend what?" Sarah inquired, a sudden sense of vulnerability washing over her. "What makes him stand out, more vibrant?" Rebecca hesitated, weighing her next words with deliberation. Since the accident, it felt like a piece of him had perished alongside his aspirations. However, in the past few weeks, during our phone calls, I sensed a shift, and now witnessing him in this moment, she pointed towards her brother, who was still engaging with the children. Sarah sensed her heart racing. "Mrs. Rebecca, You don't need to say anything," Rebecca softly interjected. "Please ensure he is well taken care of, all right? James might appear strong on the outside, yet deep down, he's more delicate than he seems," Sarah concluded, astonished by her own audacity. Rebecca nodded, a subtle smile gracing her lips. "Precisely." James broke the silence of the moment. At last, he became aware of their existence. "What are you both murmuring about?" he inquired, a trace of his former sardonic wit lacing his tone. "Nothing at all, little brother," Rebecca said, giving Sarah a playful wink. "I'm simply reflecting on the challenges that come with your case." The remainder of the day unfolded in a blend of unease and solace. The doctors assured that Rebecca would be all right, though she would require a few weeks to recuperate. The uncertainty of where she would spend this time lingered in the atmosphere, unvoiced yet palpable. As the afternoon waned and they readied themselves to depart from the hospital, James finally broached the subject at hand. "Rebecca," he started with a hint of uncertainty, "I was considering that it might be more beneficial for you to spend some time at the mansion to ensure a proper recovery." Sarah's stomach twisted in knots. The notion of Rebecca in the mansion signified transformations, intricacies. "James, I'm uncertain if," Rebecca began, shooting a swift look at Sarah. "We have ample room," James asserted, "and with Sarah present, we'd have an experienced individual to assist with your recovery." Sarah sensed the intensity of her siblings' stares upon her. "Certainly," she heard herself say, as if her voice echoed from a distance, "it would be my pleasure to assist." The ride back to the mansion unfolded in quietude, with each passenger ensnared in their personal reflections. Sarah glanced at James in the rearview mirror, attempting to interpret his expressions. By the time they reached their destination, darkness had already fallen. Ethan dashed over to embrace her, excitedly sharing stories about his day with Mrs. Wilson. Sarah embraced him fiercely, sensing that everything had shifted dramatically in the past day. After tucking Ethan in for the night, Sarah discovered James in his office. He stood by the window, taking in the night's quiet beauty. "Sarah," he called, not bothering to turn around. The memory of their conversation yesterday made her heart skip a beat. Indeed, James finally confronted her, his green eyes piercing, even in the shadows. "I just want to express my gratitude for all that you've done for me and for this home." Sarah experienced a blend of relief and disappointment. It wasn't exactly the response she had anticipated, but, "And I want you to understand," he continued, "that with Rebecca present, nothing will be different. Your location and Ethan's is safe." "Thank you," she replied, sensing that there was a deeper conversation waiting to unfold, yet struggling to articulate her thoughts. As Sarah settled into the annex, her thoughts swirled in a chaotic dance. The past day had unearthed emotions and circumstances she was not ready to confront. Rebecca's arrival, the nearly spoken truth halted, the ambiguous future ahead. As she lay in her bed, gazing up at the ceiling, Sarah pondered the crossroads of her life and, more crucially, the path she would take moving forward. Blackwood Manor, once merely a task, had transformed into the heart of a tangled tapestry of feelings and potential. Amidst the chaos stood James, the figure behind the wheelchair, the puzzle she was gradually unraveling. With a heavy heart, Sarah shut her eyes, aware that the coming days would challenge everyone within the mansion's walls. A trial of endurance, of comprehension, and maybe even of affection. Rebecca's arrival at Blackwood Manor ushered in a series of understated yet impactful transformations. The harmonious cadence that once defined the interactions among Sarah, James, and Ethan has now been disrupted by the emergence of new patterns and ongoing modifications. Rebecca claimed one of the guest rooms on the first floor, turning that previously sterile space into a vibrant sanctuary. Fresh flowers, scattered books, and the soft strains of classical music drifting through the air served as a gentle reminder that the atmosphere of the house had transformed. For Sarah, the days transformed into a delicate dance of equilibrium. Alongside her regular duties with James and Ethan, she took on the added role of overseeing Rebecca's recovery, coordinating medical appointments, and making sure the new guest had all her needs met. One morning, as Rebecca worked through her physiotherapy exercises with James's sister, an unexpected observation left Sarah momentarily stunned. "You know, Sarah," Rebecca began, pausing to collect her thoughts after a flurry of activity, "it's hard to envision what this house was like prior to your presence." Sarah offered a courteous smile, feeling uncertain about how to reply. "I believe it wasn't all that dissimilar." Rebecca chuckled gently. "Oh, you can't even imagine." James was, to put it mildly, in a rather foul mood. He hardly engaged with the team, isolating himself for days within the confines of his office. She halted, her gaze locking onto Sarah. Yet now, it feels as though a spark has been reignited. Sarah sensed a flush rise to her cheeks. "Your kindness is appreciated. I'm simply fulfilling my responsibilities." "Absolutely not, my dear." Rebecca grasped her hand, catching her off guard. "Your contributions extend far beyond that. You are resurrecting my brother." James entered the room, pushing his wheelchair, breaking the moment's stillness. His gaze swiftly swept across the surroundings, a cryptic look flickering across his features. "Have I stumbled upon something in progress?" he inquired, his relaxed demeanor barely concealing a hint of envy. "Nothing at all, little brother," Rebecca said, letting go of Sarah's hand. "I want to express my gratitude to Sarah for all her assistance." James nodded, his gaze briefly locking with Sarah's. "Absolutely, her contribution has been essential." The remainder of the day unfolded in a nearly typical manner, yet Sarah found herself unable to shake off the dialogue with Rebecca and James's response from her thoughts. It felt like an unvoiced presence lingered in the atmosphere, a tangible strain that everyone avoided acknowledging. As night fell and Ethan was tucked in, Sarah discovered James in his office, a familiar sight. He leaned over the papers, yet his thoughts appeared to wander far away. "Your evening medications, sir?" she said, setting the pills down on the desk with a practiced hand. James lifted his gaze, the weariness unmistakable on his features. "Thank you, Sarah, and I truly appreciate all that you've been doing for Rebecca. I understand that this isn't included in your initial responsibilities." "No need to thank me," she said, a wave of nervousness washing over her. "I'm delighted to offer my assistance." A hush enveloped them, heavy with things left unsaid. It was James who shattered it, his voice raspy. Sarah felt a rush of excitement as she recalled their interrupted conversation from the other night. Indeed, James appeared to grapple with his thoughts for a brief moment, as though he was carefully considering every word. "Your presence here, your unwavering dedication, truly means more to me than words can convey." Sarah sensed her breath hitch. "Mr. James," he gently interrupted her, urging her to continue. "I recognize that I haven't always been the most accommodating employer. I have often been stern, at times unjust. Yet you perceived more than that. Beyond this chair, beyond my barriers." He halted, his piercing green gaze locked onto hers. "And that frightens me, Sarah. For the first time since the accident, I catch myself contemplating what lies ahead, regarding opportunities one believed had vanished for good." Sarah sensed the sting of tears welling up in her eyes. She confessed, her voice barely above a whisper, that she had been pondering that as well. James reached out, his fingers brushing gently against hers. The touch, though uncomplicated, sent a thrill coursing through Sarah's body. "But," he continued, his voice tinged with uncertainty, "I also recognize that our circumstances are intricate. You are part of my team. We must take Ethan into account." With Rebecca's presence now felt, Sarah nodded, grasping the silent meanings behind it all. "It's a nuanced scenario," she conceded. "We need time," James said, yet his tone implied he desired quite the contrary. "To grasp what we're experiencing, to ensure it's not merely gratitude or pity." Sarah finished, a subtle smile gracing her lips. "I believe we've moved beyond that point, Mr. James." He returned the smile, a heartfelt expression that brightened his entire face. "Indeed, I believe we are." A gentle knock on the door broke the stillness of the moment. There stood Rebecca, her weight resting on the sturdy support of her cane. "Apologies for the interruption," she remarked, her inquisitive eyes shifting back and forth between the pair. "I simply wanted to bid you good night." Sarah quietly stepped aside, a flush creeping up her cheeks. "Wishing you a peaceful night, Mrs. Rebecca." "Mr. James, if you don't require anything further, good night, Sarah," James responded, his tone reverting to its typical formality. Yet his eyes conveyed a deeper message. As she strolled back to the annex, Sarah experienced a sensation of weightlessness. James's words, the caress of his hand, the unspoken assurance of a shared future, all of this danced in her thoughts like a tempest. Yet, intertwined with hope, there lingered a sense of unease. The challenges that James had referred to were indeed genuine. What might Ethan's thoughts be? What impact would this have on her professional endeavors and personal existence? And Rebecca, how would she respond if she discovered the deepening emotions between her brother and the caregiver? As she lay in her bed, gazing at the moonlight streaming through the window, Sarah realized they were venturing into unknown territory. The tides shifted at Blackwood Manor, heralding the arrival of new horizons, yet also hinting at the potential for impending storms. With a deep breath, she shut her eyes, aware that the upcoming days would hold great significance. Choices would need to be faced, emotions addressed, and the fragile equilibrium they had established would be challenged. In that instant, cradled by the recollection of James's caress and the promise of a brighter future, Sarah permitted herself to envision opportunities that had, until that moment, felt beyond her reach. The days that followed the discussion in the office infused Blackwood Manor with a fresh ambience. An unseen current seemed to weave through the atmosphere, linking Sarah and James in a quiet ballet of shared looks and tentative caresses. To everyone else, everything remained the same. Sarah carried on with her duties, maintaining her usual level of efficiency as she looked after both James and now Rebecca. James adhered to his schedule of work and physiotherapy. Yet for the two of them, every exchange held a fresh significance, an unrecognized possibility that lingered in the air between them. Ethan, with his sharp youthful insight, was the first to observe something unusual. One night, as Sarah was tucking him in, he asked, "Mom, what sets you apart from Mr. James?" Sarah felt her heart race. "In what way, darling?" "I'm not sure," the boy said, his brow furrowing as he focused intently. "You exchange glances that are oddly amusing, reminiscent of how Mrs. Wilson gazes at the baker." Sarah let out a nervous chuckle. "Oh, Ethan, what a vivid imagination you have. It's time to rest. The hour is late." However, Ethan's observations were not made in isolation. Rebecca, on the mend and becoming more visible in the shared spaces of the mansion, started to direct inquisitive looks towards Sarah and her brother. One afternoon, as Sarah assisted Rebecca with her exercises in the garden, James's sister chose to confront the topic head-on. "Sarah, my dear," she started, her tone relaxed, yet her gaze focused. "What's the situation like with you and James?" Sarah sensed a flush rise to her cheeks. "Could you clarify that for me, Mrs. Rebecca?" "All is as it should be, just like every other time." Rebecca smiled, a knowing smile that hinted at secrets beneath the surface. "My brother never really managed to conceal his emotions, especially not from me." I don't know what you're talking about," Sarah stammered, a sudden wave of vulnerability washing over her. "There's no need for concern." Rebecca grasped her hand, catching her off guard. "If there's something unfolding between you, or on the verge of unfolding, I want you to understand that you have my unwavering support. James truly deserves happiness, and you have, indeed, restored warmth and brightness to this home." Sarah sensed the sting of tears welling up in her eyes. "Mrs. Rebecca, it's a bit intricate. Love is eternal, my dear," Rebecca said with a knowing smile, "yet it is a treasure worth battling for." James's arrival interrupted the conversation as he made his way down the garden path in his motorized chair. His gaze instinctively found Sarah, a spontaneous smile breaking across his face. "Am I interrupting something?" he inquired, observing the solemn faces of the two women. "Nothing significant, little brother," Rebecca said, subtly winking at Sarah, "just some chatter among friends." The remainder of the afternoon unfolded in a blend of suspense and anticipation. Sarah sensed James's eyes on her at all times, and whenever their gazes locked, it felt like an electric charge surged between them. As darkness fell and Ethan was tucked in for the night, Sarah made her way to James's office for her customary evening visit. She discovered him idle, as was often the case, yet gazing thoughtfully out the window. "Your medications, Mr. James?" she said gently. He pivoted, his emerald gaze piercing through the gentle glow of the desk lamp. "Sarah," his voice barely rose above a whisper, "I believe it's time for a conversation." She nodded, her heart racing with anticipation. "Absolutely, I believe we do." James gestured towards a chair that was close by. "Kindly take a seat." Sarah complied, her hands quivering ever so slightly. In recent days, James started, "Things have been quite intense. Since our discussion the other day, I find myself unable to stop reflecting on our connection." "Me too," Sarah confessed, her voice barely above a whisper. "Sarah," James drew nearer, gently clasping her hands in his. "I understand that our circumstances are intricate and filled with challenges, but I can no longer feign that my feelings for you are merely rooted in gratitude or friendship." Sarah sensed the sting of tears welling up in her eyes. "James, please allow me to complete my thought," he requested softly. "You revived my spirit, not merely through your physical care, but by rekindling my faith in the future, in endless possibilities, and in love itself." The term lingered in the air, heavy with significance. "I feel that way as well," Sarah admitted, her voice trembling. "However, James, there are numerous factors to take into account. Ethan, my role, your place." "I understand," he replied, "and while I don't anticipate us resolving everything at this moment, I want you to be aware that I'm ready to confront whatever comes our way, as long as you're with me." Sarah experienced a surge of feelings that threatened to overwhelm her. In a moment of spontaneity, she leaned in, her lips brushing against James's in a gentle kiss, brimming with potential and optimism. Upon their separation, both found themselves gasping for air, as though they had just completed a grueling marathon. "Is this a confirmation?" James inquired, a grin brightening his expression. Sarah's laughter rang out, a melody of unfiltered happiness. "Absolutely, James. It signifies that we will confront this side by side." A sudden noise at the door shattered the moment. In a swift motion, they turned to find Ethan standing there, his eyes filled with surprise. "Mom," he said, his voice filled with uncertainty. "What's going on?" Sarah and James shared a fleeting look, aware that this was merely the beginning of numerous trials ahead. In that instant, with the lingering warmth of the kiss on their lips and the hopeful vision of a shared future, Sarah sensed that they could conquer any obstacle that lay ahead. The tides of transformation that had been gathering at Blackwood Manor had at last crashed upon the shore, ushering in a fresh expanse of opportunities, trials, and, most importantly, affection. The morning light crept over Blackwood Manor, enveloping it in a stillness thick with anticipation. The night before had unveiled truths that would irrevocably alter the trajectory of all those present. As dawn broke, Sarah stirred from her slumber, her heart a tapestry woven with the thrill of newfound affection and the shadow of uncertainty regarding Ethan's response. The sight of her son at the office door, looking bewildered and scared, lingered heavily in her thoughts. While she busied herself with breakfast in the annex, the sound of familiar footsteps drew nearer. Ethan stepped into the kitchen, his gaze heavy with sleep yet brimming with unspoken inquiries. "Good morning, my love," Sarah said softly, striving to maintain her composure. "Did you have a restful night?" Ethan gave a slow nod, seated at the table. "Mother," reflecting on the events of last night. Sarah inhaled deeply, aware that this moment held great significance. "Absolutely, darling. I believe it's time for us to have a conversation about that." She settled beside her son, gently clasping his tiny hands in her own. "Ethan, you understand how significant Mr. James has been to us, don't you? He provided us with a sanctuary, a fresh beginning." The young lad nodded once more. "He is quite pleasant. He shares fascinating insights about planes and allows me to utilize the soccer field." Sarah offered a gentle smile. "Indeed, he holds a unique significance. And, well, Mommy found out that she has strong feelings for him in a unique way, like how adults feel about one another." Ethan's eyes grew large with realization. "What do you mean, like a couple?" "Something along those lines," Sarah affirmed, her heart pounding with excitement. "What are your thoughts on that?" Ethan paused, absorbing the details in quiet contemplation. To Sarah's astonishment and joy, a smile blossomed on his face. "Does this imply that Mr. James will become my father?" Sarah sensed the sting of tears welling up in her eyes. "Oh, Ethan, it's not exactly as you think. It's intricate, yet it signifies that he will play an even more significant role in our lives. If that works for you, naturally." Ethan leaped from his chair, enveloping Sarah in a warm embrace. "I have a fondness for Mr. James, Mom. Your happiness brings me joy." In that instant, Sarah understood that regardless of the challenges to come, they would confront them side by side. Within the main house, James found himself engaged in a challenging dialogue with Rebecca. To his astonishment, his sister appeared unfazed by the revelation. "Honestly, James," Rebecca remarked with a grin, "it was just a question of when." It was evident to anyone observing the situation unfolding between the two of you. James experienced a sense of relief wash over him. "Do you give your consent? Is it approved?" Rebecca chuckled softly. "My beloved brother, I am in a state of celebration." Sarah revitalized this home, and even more significantly, she restored your presence among us. "Absolutely, I stand behind it." The ensuing hours unfolded in a tempest of feelings and dialogues. James and Sarah assembled everyone in the central room. Ethan, Rebecca, Martha, and also Anderson, the driver. The moment had come to formalize the changes. "Starting today," James declared, his hands securely linked with Sarah's. The atmosphere here at the mansion will shift. Sarah has transcended her role as merely an employee. She is, indeed, the woman I cherish deeply. A hush fell over the crowd, only to be shattered by a thunderous wave of applause and cheers of congratulations. Martha wept freely, murmuring something about finally and it's about time. Anderson wore a subtle smile, while Rebecca embraced everyone, her happiness spreading like wildfire. Ethan, caught up in the chaos, tugged at James's sleeve. "Mr. James," he inquired, his tone earnest. "Is it okay if I start calling you Dad now?" James experienced a surge of emotion that he believed was beyond his reach. Gazing at Sarah, her eyes glistening with tears, he replied, "It would be a privilege, Ethan, a genuine privilege." In the months that ensued, Blackwood Manor underwent remarkable transformations. The annex underwent a transformation and expansion, evolving into a seamless extension of the main house. Sarah and Ethan have officially settled in, yet they maintain the original space as a cherished family retreat. James, motivated by his fresh responsibilities as a father and partner, immersed himself in accessibility projects, turning the mansion into a beacon of inclusive design. The soccer field, frequently utilized by Ethan and his friends, has been enhanced with an adapted area to ensure James can join in the games. The revelation of the connection between businessman James Blackwood and his former caregiver sparked considerable excitement among high society and local media. Yet, the couple's steadfast and affectionate approach, along with Rebecca's unwavering support, quickly turned what might have been a scandal into a narrative of triumph and love. With James's encouragement, Sarah picked up her studies again, focusing on physiotherapy. United in purpose, they created a foundation aimed at supporting individuals with disabilities, leveraging the Blackwoods' impact and resources to transform countless lives. On a bright afternoon, nearly a year after that pivotal night in the office, the Blackwood family, because that's what they had become, a family, assembled in the garden for a picnic. Ethan dashed alongside his friends, while Rebecca serenaded the evening on the piano from the veranda, and Sarah and James observed the scene, their fingers entwined in a gentle embrace. "You know," James said, his eyes sparkling with a joy that had once felt out of reach, "there was a moment when I believed my life had come to a halt on that landing strip, that all I could aspire to was mere existence." Sarah tightened her grip on his hand, urging him to go on. "But now," he continued, his voice thick with feeling, "now I understand that day wasn't a conclusion. It was a new beginning. The start of a journey that would bring me to you, to Ethan, to a life I never could have envisioned, even in my most fantastical dreams." Sarah drew closer, pressing her lips gently against his. "Our beginning," she murmured softly against his lips. Under the warm embrace of the afternoon sun, enveloped by the joyful sounds of laughter and music, Sarah and James realized they had discovered something truly rare and invaluable. A connection that surpassed tangible and societal constraints, mending past hurts and paving the way for a radiant tomorrow. Blackwood Manor, previously a beacon of solitude and resentment, now thrummed with vitality and affection. It served as a reminder that often, joyful conclusions are not the final chapter, but rather the start of an exciting and beautiful journey ahead. As the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the landscape in warm golden tones, the Blackwood family shared a heartfelt embrace, filled with gratitude for the moment and anticipation for the future they would create together. A future brimming with challenges, undoubtedly, yet also abundant in love, understanding, and the unwavering belief that united, they could conquer any hurdle.